Good morning. I'm Kipp. My pronouns are he, him. And part of the fun of practicing hybrid worship is I'm going to practice looking at the camera because, hi, all you people on Zoom. I'm also going to try practice looking at people in the sanctuary because you matter too. Our first reading is a poem from the Dakota poet Gwen Westerman, and this is what she says about her poem. She says, it honors her Dakota value of generosity and sharing whatever we have with those around us. This poem is a response to the missionaries and Indian agents who often reported that our ancestors did not know the value of things that the government provided them. Blankets, flour, meat, food, tools, other supplies. Might interject to wonder why the government needed to supply them things anyway. Sort of a twisted reality when everything had been taken away. And this is back to her, that when those goods were distributed, the people would immediately share with others who did not have as much as they did. But I think our ancestors did know exactly the value of things, and that value only comes when you can share. That's what she says about the poem. It's called Giveaway Song. And I'll say it ends with a repeated phrase, Wopida Ye, which is Dakota for thank you. Giveaway Song. This is my giveaway. Not because I don't want it anymore, not because it's out of style or broken or useless since it lost its lid or one of its buttons, not because I don't understand the value of things. This is my giveaway because I have enough to share with you. Because I have been given so much health, love, happiness, pain, sorrow, fear, to share from the heart in a world where words can be meaningless when they come only from the head. This is my giveaway. To touch what is good in you with words your heart can hear, like ripples from a pebble dropped in water, moving outward, growing wider, touching others. You are strong. You are kind. You are beautiful. This is my giveaway. Wopida ye, wopida ye, wopida ye. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The Bible reading assigned for today comes from Luke chapter 6. It's a part that a lot of Bible scholars refer to as the blessings and woes, which is just descriptive. Well, you'll hear it. Jesus came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured, and all in the crowd were trying to touch him, for power came out from him and healed all of them. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the realm of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you, revile you, defame you on account of the child of humanity. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven. For that is what their ancestors did to the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets." This is the word of God. In 1927, two metal frame towers grew on either side of the Koningshaven Channel in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, with an expanse of bridge connecting them in between. The bridge was part of a railway system. It was a replacement for an earlier one that was supposed to swing open whenever barges came through on the channel. But in 1918, it didn't swing quite far enough, and a German ship crashed right into it. The new bridge, the 1927 edition, is not a particularly beautiful piece of architecture, but it is pretty ingenious. if you were logged in when the slide that says we're recording came on, there was a picture of that bridge on the slide. But it'll come around again in the prayer time slides, so we can see what I'm talking about. It's sort of like a drawbridge, except that instead of opening in the middle and having two pieces open up, just the middle expanse is one thing, and it moves up when a ship comes through, and then back down when the ship was done and the trains needed to come by. Brilliant. Its official name is Koningshaven Bridge, the King's Channel Bridge. But locals call it De Hef. To my ears, that nickname sounds powerful. It's short, it's blunt, authoritative, like Linda. She said that she would. Probably, that wasn't, I'm sorry. Probably just because it sounds to my ears like the Spanish term el jefe, the chief. But really, de hef just means the lift. It's truth in advertising. The bridge lifts when the boats come and go underneath. De Hef took heavy damage in 1940 when Germany bombed Rotterdam during the Second World War. It was repaired, and it stayed in use until 1994, when it was decommissioned because the railway had a brand new tunnel to send the trains through. But the locals loved the bridge. When the city was going to take it apart, to demolish it, the public protest saved it. It was later declared a national monument. It was taken apart for a massive renovation project that lasted 2014 to 2017, but city leaders said after that they would never dismantle it again. So now it stands proudly astraddle the river, the harbor, with its middle section raised up all the way, which is about 130 feet, watching over the waterways. But how quickly the promises of De Hef's dignity have been forgotten. Last week, the city of Rotterdam announced that its middle section would once again be temporarily dismantled. There is a project underway further inland at the Ocean Coast shipyard, which is about 12 and a half miles upstream from Rotterdam. So Rotterdam and De Hef stand in between it and the North Sea. That project will be a ship that is about 415 long and has 3 aluminum and steel masts that are too large to go under De Hef at its 130-foot height. So Rotterdam agreed, apparently, they've since walked it back, but they apparently agreed to do what they had promised just 5 years ago would never be done again. And you can imagine, the locals are up in arms. One person suggested that people gather cartons of rotten eggs to throw at the ship as it flows past. As of this past Friday, more than 4,400 people on Facebook said that they would go for that. People sign up for stuff and don't show up all the time on Facebook, so who knows what it would look like. But it would also be pretty difficult to actually hit the boat with the eggs because the eggs would have to fly more than 230 feet. So only the people with the strongest arms might actually make that happen. But the hubbub is a sign of how seriously the locals take their landmark, De Hef, how betrayed they feel by city officials, and how angry they are about the ship, which, in case you hadn't already heard the story, is not a public works project or a boat that will be used for distributing humanitarian aid or some such noble thing. It is being built for the private sailing pleasure of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, because apparently a private rocket ship isn't enough. One must also have the world's largest private sailing yacht. "Woe to you who are rich," said Jesus, "for you have received your consolation." To be honest, though, I'll bet Jeff Bezos does feel pretty consoled. And I wonder if even setting up my sermon this way is something of a deflection. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that the existence of billionaires is morally appalling. in a world where so many people struggle with mere existence, where even in a wealthy nation there are deeply entrenched veins of poverty. Last year, the Economic Policy Institute reported that CEO pay in 2020 averaged 351 times that of a typical worker. Just of the average, 351 times the average. And that since 1978, CEO pay has gone up more than 1,300%. This while other people get farther and farther away from having what they need to make it through. There's something deeply broken about a system that allows that to happen. But I still wonder if lifting up a Jeff Bezos, or for that matter, an Elon Musk, as the foil for the blessings and the woes in Luke's gospel, doesn't head off some of the questions before they start to feel too personal. Luke's Jesus is nothing if not blunt. The assigned reading for today is the opening of a section in Luke's Gospel that scholars call the Sermon on the Plain, since it starts out by saying that Jesus went to a wide open area with a great crowd of disciples and other people. It's Luke's version of what Matthew calls the Sermon on the Mount, so it's a different setting. Where Matthew starts out with beatitudes, or just blessings, and does a little spiritualizing of them to boot. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Luke's Jesus goes hard at the wealth gap, matching blessed are you who are poor, comma, end stop, with woe to you who are rich, and blessed are you who are hungry, against woe to you who are full now. There's not a lot of middle ground in sight on that plane. The commentators in the Jewish annotated New Testament, which is just what it sounds like, Jewish commentators writing about the New Testament, they note that Jesus is situated well within Jewish teaching on this point. To cite just a few of the examples from the scriptures that Jesus would have known. Deuteronomy 15:11 says, "Since there will never cease to be some in need on the earth, I therefore command you," God commanding, "open your hand to the poor and needy neighbor in your land." The prophet Isaiah envisions God calling to those who have been imprisoned and destitute and oppressed, saying, "Congested roadways will become places where they can safely graze, and barren heights will become lush pasture land for them. They will never hunger or thirst, and scorching wind and sun will never plague them, for the one who has compassion on them will lead and guide them to springs of water." The prophet Jeremiah says, envisions God saying, "I will give drink to the thirsty and satisfy all who languish." The Jewish commentators sum up the ethos by noticing that Jewish tradition, this is their quote, regards the poor, the hungry, etc., not as cursed or impure, but as deserving recipients of divine and earthly care. On the flip side, the Hebrew Scriptures are deeply suspicious of wealth. Again, Jeremiah uses an unflattering image. Like the partridge hatching the eggs it did not lay, so are all who gain wealth unjustly. It will leave them in midlife, and at the end of their life they will prove themselves the fool. And the prophet Habakkuk says, "Greed is treacherous. The arrogant do not endure. They open their throats wide as the grave. Like death, they never have enough." That's a pretty strong indictment. "They gather all the nations for themselves and collect all peoples as their own." That's not to mention space, right? But how easily, you see, I've done this again, how easily it is that the Bezoses and Musks of the world take my attention so that I can deflect from myself and from the systems that shape me. Which is why I actually need the voice of Luke's Jesus in my life. Because, as again the Jewish New Testament commentators note, Luke's gospel encourages extreme generosity. And while those commentators see that Luke sanctions voluntary poverty, if If you read it, it's true. Sell everything you have and give it to the poor. They say that Luke does this in ways that the rabbinic commentators do not. Rabbinic sources do not, because personal impoverishment would create hardships for the family and community. While I think that those rabbinic sources raise a sensible point, while I have no intention of giving up my salary, sorry, Finance Committee, or my savings, and while I have no intention of following St. Francis of Assisi and symbolizing my discipleship by stripping naked in the public square, we don't talk about that part when we bless all the animals in church. I need the stark absolutes of Luke's Jesus so that I don't retreat into congratulating myself for the mere fact of having been born white and middle class in America. All of which is to say that these blessings and woes make me uncomfortable, but with a necessary discomfort. The Bezos super yacht should definitely get painted with the sulfur smears of rotting eggs if Rotterdam breaks their promise to take apart the bridge. May it be so, O Lord, may it be so. But I also need to be reminded that I've got a bit of Jeff Bezos inside of me. The condition of living in the I don't just mean because I have an Amazon Prime account, although that raises some troubling questions, doesn't it? I mean that the condition of living in the contemporary United States, and especially of living as white and middle class in the contemporary United States, is the condition of having plenty and still feeling bereft. It is the condition of feeling entitled to all sorts of things without ever questioning or even recognizing that sense of entitlement. It is the condition of having my comfort and security and sense of freedom derived at the expense of others. This week I learned the story of Stephen Smith, who was born to an enslaved mother in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania, 1795. Was himself sold to someone else as a young boy. His mother, Nancy Smith, escaped to follow after and go rescue him. When Nancy's enslaver caught up to her, she tried to force her to return, but the man who had purchased Stephen stood in between them. He stood with Nancy, and so did other residents of the town. Some historians see this as a key turning point in the development of the Underground Railroad. Stephen Smith stayed with that person and learned the lumber business from him. And then when he was 21, he borrowed $50 to purchase his freedom. And then he put his knowledge of the lumber business to work, went into business for himself, eventually expanded into real estate. He became the largest stockholder in a company that built a bridge across the Susquehanna River. He got a business partner. They moved to Philadelphia. They sold coal, pre-global climate change knowledge. He sold coal. They bought 22 rail cars that transported lumber throughout the state. Those rail cars also held secret compartments that could hide people. They literally put the railroad into Underground Railroad. During his lifetime, Smith was recognized as the wealthiest black person in the country. But his wealth served a purpose. He helped shepherd people to freedom. He supported abolition, abolitionist causes and institutions. He poured money into institutions that enhanced the lives of people in black communities, churches, educational institutions, a care home for the elderly, public halls. I don't know what Luke's Jesus would have said about Stephen Smith. The piece I read about him in the Inquirer didn't talk about his labor practices or what his workers were paid. But I'm struck by the story of a man who was born into enslavement, who used the very tools of the system that dehumanized him to build a life that enriched others. Maybe telling his story sits in some kind of tension with Jesus' blessings and woes, which are very blunt, again. But maybe it's a productive tension. Stephen Smith's story is definitely not one of voluntary impoverishment, nor should it be. His poverty was one of the aims and designs of America. Smith's story is, to borrow the Jewish New Testament scholar's phrase, a story of extravagant generosity. It is also one of extravagant risk. So it holds my feet to the fire to ask how I will use my life to keep me mindful of the woes as I hope to live into the blessings, and to internalize the fact that, as Gwen Westerman learned from her Dakota ancestors, value only comes when we can share. And this is God's good news. Amen.